Behind this locked gate lie the treasures of the Hill Museum and Manuscript Library. Thousands of rare ancient books and manuscripts in the library and university collections. Ethiopian prayer books. Heavily illuminated books of hours from the Middle Ages. Documents signed by kings and queens. Captain's journals from 18th century Mediterranean voyages. Qurans in graceful Arabic script. Multilingual books on almost every subject from the 15th century forward. These carefully curated shelves contain volume after volume, holding the wisdom and knowledge of the past for the understanding of the future. But whose future? Will these books, painstakingly preserved for centuries, even have a future? Will the next generation care that they exist? Do you even understand why they should exist? If these volumes are going to have value in the coming decades, if Himmel's work over the last half-century is going to matter in the next century, then the future generation of scholars must be fostered. And what better place to nurture this than in the middle of a university campus brimming with 21st century young adults? Can these pages speak to them? How can these inquisitive, visually bombarded, developing minds relate to the quiet, age-old documents written in languages they can't read or even understand? Do they even care? Do you even care? Join two of my young colleagues and me as we work to explore what these pages have to say to us today and answer the ultimate question, why care? Thank you, Dr. Mugler, for joining me in the Rare Book Collection today.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's always a fun place to explore. I was going through the stacks and I came across this rather unique volume on the stacks the other day, and I thought, this might be an interesting book to see if we can find a way to connect it to our young audience that we have here on the campus. What am I looking at?
Yeah, this is a real fun book. It's got all sorts of interesting things in it. It's kind of a collection of various texts in Arabic from the early 18th century, around 1730, and it's all sorts of things really. It was put together by a couple students in what's now Turkey,
Really?
who were learning kind of the basics of life in the Ottoman Empire basically, and some kind of theological stuff in here, some commentaries on the Quran.
Wow.
Lots of various little texts about questions that come up in daily life. I think it's a really interesting book. I think and like I said, it was put together by some students who were kind of collecting things, including some texts that their teacher was writing, and so I think it would be a really interesting thing for your students to learn about.
So it's basically a journal of daily life or daily kind of encounters from the, did you say 1700s?
Yeah. It's kind of addressing some like legal question, things that you might have questions about based on things you encounter in daily life. So, addressing some issues that people might be wondering about to help them kind of go about their lives in the best way, and then also some more kind of academic stuff that's more like abstract and theological. It's kind of a range of stuff. So
Wonderful.
It's a real interesting book.
Yeah, abstract and theological.
Yeah.
Sounds like perfect ways to try to connect to the modern world all the way through.
Right.
Immediately when I pick up this book, I'm connected to the binding. I'm connected to the people who did the binding. I love these beautifully handwritten pages with the marginalia and the notes written. Mm-hmm. I find myself easily connected to this, and I can see how it relates to possibly my life if I can only read it. But I've spent my life, I've spent 20 years surrounded by rare books and manuscripts of experts like this. Finding a way to see if our 21st century 18 to 22-year-olds can connect with this will be an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
I think this might be the perfect thing to see if they can figure out why they should care about this.
I think you're right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have with us here an 18th century book about theology,
that's what Tim
laws,
said.
morals. Definitely has been through a lot.
Yeah, no kidding. Look at this cover.
Might
it's
be
so like
Might be interesting.
It's very loved.
It's very loved, or it has not been loved. So that's the
also true.
alternative if it's in this shape. But
That's a good point.
and it looks like that binding. This is such interesting, or the cover to me.
Oh man, yeah, no kidding.
I wonder if that is original because it doesn't seem like it fits for it.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's clearly not a young binding either.
No.
So I wonder. I mean, 18th century, this thing's had plenty of time to go through multiple bindings and plenty of time to sort of fall apart like it is.
Mm-hmm. Multiple owners,
Yeah.
multiple countries.
Yeah, potentially.
Because we open it up. I'm gonna guess that's Arabic from my.
Yeah, I'll do the same.
I'm a classical languages major, but I'm not that classical language. So
Yeah. Oh man, look at this.
beautiful. I wish I could read it. That would make
Same.
this a little bit easier.
That would help. But I mean, even without, you can tell that there's a lot of note taking that's happening. I mean, these sideways notes here. It looks like maybe some water damage here, but someone came back and
Yeah.
wrote over what was already here, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been used as well. This is something that people have been interacting with.
Oh, look at this. There's like this same repeating red symbol over and over again. Look at that. That's like
okay.
that looks like the same symbol.
It's
that you
like
write.
like sight reading right now. That's what we're doing. Like we're
Yeah,
back in
right.
kindergarten.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Except we can't read this at all.
Yeah, we're just
We're just
the
staring.
blind leading the blind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder what that red symbol is.
Yeah, we'll have to see, huh? That's what the experts
Yeah.
are for, not us. And then there's more red text that's used throughout.
Yeah, that's a different set of symbols there. But then again, this same squiggly with the squiggly is my
Yeah.
only descriptor.
And commentary that runs throughout still.
Yeah.
It looks like the more I'm paging through and I'm sort of feeling these pages as
man.
well, that maybe this is even a few different books
Yeah.
that have been compiled together.
Oh, yeah, maybe. And it looks like different scribes too. I mean, this sort of hand looks less sharp than this one, maybe. Right? So there could be a lot of different people that are coming back to this
Or
book.
some really tired
Yeah.
scholar burning the midnight oil.
Someone just got tired of writing.
Yeah, that's when I annotate my books. That's typically what happens because I'm getting one hand. I'm like scribbling kind of.
I mean, yeah, you can
my
see
handwriting's terrible.
this is crooked. This is, I don't know, upside down maybe? I don't even know which way it's oriented. We could be looking at this book upside down for all we know, right?
Well, yeah, that's sort of the problem, huh?
Oh, jeez.
At least we're flipping through it in the right direction.
That's true.
That's
That is
the thing.
true.
We didn't open it the Western way.
That's true, yes, because they
Wait,
read right to left in Arabic,
yes,
right?
in Arabic is right to left. Yeah.
Man,
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about this.
yeah.
Because I mean, it's obviously has a very cool story that we just don't have access to.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun, even without being able to read it, you can make out these assumptions, you can make out these ideas from what is to us, nothing. This is like, I can't understand this at all, but we're making, I don't know, that you can feel something here. I think you can just kind of feel the number of people that have touched this book just by flipping through it.
Yeah, it's not a copy of Holes that you find at a local library for sure.
No, I don't think you could find this at Barnes & Noble.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Well, and that's one of the other things I'm wondering too, right, is, I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I see Arabic and my first thought is like Quran maybe, right?
Well, you are more of you have a global mind in a way that I certainly don't. So.
Oh, no?
I gotta trust that instinct a little bit.
I hope so. And I mean, and like you said too, this is, or I think Tim told us, this is a religious text, so maybe fragments of it, or maybe by religious text it just is a Quran with some notation in it.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out. But yeah, I think we're hopefully on the right track.
Hopefully, right? Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
If I could interject myself in here a little bit, it's been fun to sit on the side and listen to you talk about this manuscript and have you kind of see if you have a connection to it at all. Well, and do you feel a connection to it?
I think I feel that sort of a pull. We've been asking all these questions, we have all these assumptions, but we have no way of getting any answers, which is, I think, a little frustrating for me, maybe for you.
Yeah.
What's stopping you from getting answers?
We
Not having-
can't read the dang thing.
Yes.
Not being able to access
Yeah.
that knowledge quickly. And I mean, that might be an instant gratification thing. Let's not get into that too much. But yeah.
not being able to access it, not being able to read it, does that hinder you in terms of caring about this thing?
Oh, that's a great question.
I'd say a little bit, right? Because otherwise, this is, to me, I can observe this sort of like a piece of art. I do think this is beautiful. I think it is beautiful the way that it is old and the way that it has made us here. It made its way here to us. But at the same time, I am unable to appreciate it on a deeper level, the same way that you can look at a Michelangelo different after taking an art history class,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I just don't have the broader context that this exists in because I can't read it.
Okay, so what do you need? What do you need to help you make connection to it?
Someone who could read Arabic.
That might help.
Would go a long
That
way.
might help. But
Well,
what I think is interesting about it is it's asking theological questions, and that's what people have always done. In different ways, different cultural ways, of course. But I think that's something we're really going to be able to delve into here. What is different for these people who lived by these texts and these ideas and asked these questions? What questions might they have that we might have today? And I guess what ties us through this little book that has somehow made its way to Collegeville, Minnesota.
Yeah. That idea of tying you to the past. And what's beautiful is these little lines, that's their voice. That's the first person that will actually give you his or her, most likely a his in this case,
Yeah,
comment
unfortunately.
or idea of what he or she was thinking about this text at that point in time. And maybe then you can find a way to connect yourself to it. Well, I wish I could read Arabic. I wish I could be the one that helped you unpack this, but I think we might need someone who knows a little bit more than all three of us put together. Well, I see if I can find some time to have you two spend with Dr. Mugler, our curator of Islamic and Eastern Christian manuscripts, and see if he can help you bridge that gap and make you care that this manuscript even exists.
Let's do it.
His greatest test so far.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Dr. Mugler. We're so glad that you're here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Josh Mugler. I'm curator of Eastern Christian and Islamic manuscripts here at the Hill Museum and Manuscript Library. I've been working here for almost exactly 5 years now. So started out just cataloging. Now I'm kind of overseeing some of the collections. Yeah, I grew up around St. Louis. Yeah, I've been living in Minnesota for about 3 years now, and just enjoying the work. I did my PhD at Georgetown, so I spent some time on the East Coast, and now I'm out here, and really enjoying everything that I get to do here. So it's great.
So Claire and I noticed when we were talking about the manuscript and looking over it, we noticed this here. Is this that paratext you were mentioning earlier?
Yeah, that would be a great example of it, these kind of marginal notes. Sometimes you'll have, it's anything that's, like I said, kind of outside of what is the main text here. So para just means like it's running alongside it, more or less. Sometimes, and this manuscript doesn't actually have too much of this, but sometimes on these kind of blank notes or blank leaves at the front or back, which we'd call fly leaves, you might have
cool.
additional notes. So there's a little bit here. Which we have here. So sometimes people might write additional notes on these blank pages where they're just kind of using it to keep track of, like I was saying, dates or accounts or something like that.
Yeah.
Or who owns the manuscript.
Oh,
that
yeah.
sort of,
I guess Mark was saying that we don't know anything about Arabic at all. What can you tell us with your expertise about any of the conventions of how this book operates?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a few things I could point out. One thing is this little opening invocation here at the top of the text.
Okay.
So this is, in Arabic, it's called the basmala. It's like an invocation at the beginning of a text. So this particular one is the one that's used in Islam. It says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. This invocation is used at the beginning of every chapter of the Quran, almost, and it's traditional to open basically any Islamic text or even like a speech. People will say this, at the beginning of if they're giving some sort of a speech. Any kind of textual composition like that, you generally begin with that. So in this manuscript we have a bunch of different texts, and one way of noticing where one text ends and another one begins is that you have that same invocation that's here kind of set, where you see a little bit of a gap in the lines, and that tells you like, okay, something new is starting here, and so then you Yeah, you see it again here. So,
Okay.
so sometimes there's also a little title written. In many cases, it's red ink to help you see that.
Okay. Yep. Yep. We were
But,
wondering about that.
But you've almost always got that invocation there, and often that's followed up with some sort of praise to God and blessings on the prophet. But there's also a sense of like, you know, I'm building my entire scholarship around the kind of foundation of these people that have gone before me. So like, you know, this text cannot exist. It doesn't make sense without the text that you're commenting on, which is also commenting on the Quran. So it kind of like builds this interesting chain where it's doing much more than just like a modern footnote would to really show you like, I am learning from this person who lived 300 years ago, and I'm like expanding on what they said and kind of adapting it. So I think it's a really interesting kind of way of doing scholarship that is much less about like trying to do everything new and be like your own, like it's less about you trying to do something that no one's ever done and more about how you build on what's come before you. So I think that's a pretty interesting kind of way of doing scholarship. And so I point that out to say that you can see scattered all across these opening pages where we're looking at commentaries, there's this same word in red over and over again. You can see it here.
Yes.
We thought that was maybe what was going on.
Yeah.
So
this word in Arabic is qawluhu, which is basically like he said, or like, you know, what this is what he said. So each of these introduces a quotation from the text that's being commented on, either from the earlier commentary or from the Quran itself. And then after that quotation is finished, then the author will tell you what he thinks about that quotation. So that's how they're kind of marking the structure here, and they're using that red ink to point out each time you've got a new quotation. So there's a number of ways that scribes can kind of like help you understand what the text is doing and help you see the different layers of it. So that's a little bit about how the scribe, you know, even and this is a very simple manuscript. There's not any real decoration. You know, there's not like a lot of funding or a lot of expense going into this, but they do have access to red and black ink, and there's a few places in here where there's a little green as well. But you know, they can use just that contrast of colors to help kind of like tell you what you're seeing, and that really, I mean, speaking as someone who catalogs a lot of manuscripts, those kinds of things are so helpful, just to be able to just like understand, even at a glance, just to say like, oh, you know, so I see what's going on here. It's obviously a commentary because there's this thing that I've seen so many times before, and I can get a sense of like the structure of it, that here's a quote, here's a quote, here's a quote, and start to try to figure out, okay, who's the author of this, who is the author of the text that they're commenting on, and so on. You know, there are kind of genre questions and also just questions of who produced this and why. You know, this was probably produced by some students who were using it for their studies, and so, you know, they've got this text, and maybe in class or maybe after class as they read it, they're kind of going through, and they're, you know, it's important to kind of jot down all these thoughts that they're having about what they're reading.
So when my English teacher in high school told me to annotate the heck out of Lord of the Flies, this is where that starts?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I hope it looked just like this, and it'll be around for a few hundred years.
It was an ancient copy of Lord of the Flies from the 18th century,
Yeah, I mean, I guess, when was this created then, do you know?
Yeah, so we have a couple dates in here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So we can see that. So there's one date here. So this is 1136 on the Islamic calendar, which is 1724, I believe, on the Gregorian calendar. And so then I was kind of looking at information about this author and this city, and I realized that there's actually a school. There was a school in that city with this name, Imarat's Madrasasi. So then I thought, you know, I feel like there's a very very solid case, that I can be pretty confident that this was, this was copied at this school. The name of the school, it's vague enough. There could be a number of schools with this name, but the fact that there was a school with this name in this city with this scholar who was alive at the time makes me pretty confident that this is from that town, and that these were students who were studying in a context where they would interact directly with this author. And so I'm pretty sure that these were, like I said, there's a bunch of different texts in here by different authors, but I think that the ones that are by this author, he would have been one of their teachers, I think. Yeah. So they were copying his texts.
Can you sense that likely these students worked with the person that they were commentating their work? Is there sort of familiarity with that, or anything like? Do you get what I'm saying? Well, I think so. There's 3 texts in here by this author. They're all fairly short texts. One of them is a kind of theological discussion of like faith and doubt, faith and unbelief. The other 2 feel a little bit more kind of personal to me. One of them is he calls it a complaint, and it's kind of a heartfelt expression of grief to God and the prophet, because there had been some attacks on Marash recently by like nomadic warrior groups. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a pretty interesting kind of example of someone who, he's a scholar obviously, and he's responding, in a scholarly way, but it's also a personal text. It's an expression of grief. And then the third text by him is a short text that's framed as a letter to someone named Ibrahim. I don't know who he is, but it's just kind of expressing his dissatisfaction with the world, and kind of some of it might be kind of the difficulties of the scholarly life. I don't know. That he's like, I don't have enough salary, and I don't have enough food. Well, it's the same problem still, then, huh?
Yeah, exactly. But
some things don't change.
But so I think it's interesting what they actually were copying by him, because it's not some of his most like high intellectual kind of treatise type of stuff, and it's not long text, but it's stuff that they probably would have related to, I think, as his students and as people who were no doubt experiencing a lot of these same difficulties that he was. And I know that there's, a lot of things that are in here I think are pretty rare. These, I know some of these texts, there's at least 1 or 2 other copies in the world. Some of them I think are probably maybe unique to this manuscript.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's little stuff like that, where it's not, these are not things that are copied 1,000 times. There are things that are just copied once or twice, probably.
Wow. And we have it here in front of us.
We have it, yeah.
How lucky we are.
So impressive.
Yeah.
So cool.
Something so personal, too, has made its way all the way to us now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think part of the work of cataloging is to help bridge some of those gaps that when you look at the online record for this, you can see a good amount of information about what's in it, even if you can't read the text, and maybe it gets you interested enough to go learn Arabic.
Is that your little plug? Yeah. One of you guys has to replace me one day. That's funny.
So Dr. Mugler, you were telling us just a little bit about some of the scribes, but we've opened up to a page, but can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, we've got, this is the page where this complaint text begins that I was just describing. You can see it here with the invocation, but just before the invocation of the new text, we have a little bit of writing that kind of concludes the previous text. And so this is what we would call a colophon, which is basically at the end of a manuscript where the scribe will, sometimes, if the cataloger is lucky, they will give their name or the date or some information about where and when they produced it. So we have a short one here where one of our scribes has written the date. This is the other date that's in the manuscript, 1142.
But we have at least 2 scribes because 2 of them give their names. One of them is Omar, who's mentioned here, and then on another page there's another scribe named Mustafa who mentions his name. So we know of at least 2 people who were involved in copying the text here, and there could be 1 or 2 more.
Gotcha.
But there's still an emphasis on making it usable for scholarship for students by giving lots of space for notes, which is pretty common in manuscripts that students would have been using. So you do have to splurge on leaving, having enough space there for the student to use. So there's that emphasis on making it usable.
Gotcha.
And kind of
So those
practical.
huge margins are very intentional.
Yeah. And in this case, for whatever reason, nobody really marked up these pages. They were doing more note taking at the beginning, which is something you also see that they kind of like they put more notes at the beginning and then they're like, okay, I'm not writing anymore.
Yeah.
You see that pretty often, but in some parts of this manuscript there was definitely a lot of note taking going on.
That's funny that has not changed at all.
Exactly.
I mean, when I know we're talking about Lord of the Flies a lot, but my Lord of the Flies book from 9th grade English was the same way, where it was like, surely the teacher's not going to flip through the whole thing, right?
Yeah. People really don't change.
Right.
And when you have something that's made by people so personally, you're really going to see that.
Yeah.
And I think as history majors, both Mark and I'm not going to speak for both of us, but from my experience, sometimes you lose that.
Mm-hmm.
But that is really so cool to see that. Yeah. So this is quite a damaged manuscript, and it is quite old as well. So what do you know about its journey to this campus and under Himmel's care?
What we know about it is that there was one of Himmel's field directors back in the 70s was named Urban Steiner, and so he was one of the monks here from St. John's, and he was mostly based in Spain, I believe, kind of overseeing some of Himmel's projects there with the microfilm photography. But he did some traveling in the Middle East, and he bought some manuscripts while he was there, and so we're pretty sure that this was one of those. But we don't really know a lot about what happened in between, or like it's a little bit of a mystery, kind of how and where this manuscript went over the years.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think it's funny you mentioned water damage, because I've noted on the cover on both sides of it here, it sort of looks like there are, in the light here you can sort of see better, there's sort of these scratched in designs along the sides. It looks like maybe some seashells here.
Yep.
Seashells? Oh, okay, I got that right. There we go.
Yeah.
And maybe
Say that
a
5
turtle?
times.
Is that, what might decoration on that cover?
No, I think, so this was really, I was reading over some of the things you were writing about this before, and I thought that was really interesting because, when I'm cataloging and I'm looking at the digital images, I'm never looking at like the cover really.
Yeah.
Because I'm mostly looking at what are the contents. So I hadn't actually noticed these designs on the cover, but yeah, I think it's really interesting. It seems to be kind of a leather cover, or leather over like a cardboard or something, and then it's got these like stamped designs in it. So I think you're 100% right that these are seashells here, kind of 4 on the front and 4 on the back. I'm not totally convinced there's a turtle in here. There's something.
I probably wouldn't have been. Do they have turtles in the Mediterranean? Do they? I don't think they do.
Probably. I don't know.
Maybe.
They probably
Who
do.
knows?
We'll get a biologist in
We're
here
the
next
wrong
time.
people,
Right,
And then there's these little things along the border that kind of look like flowers, or even just little little kind of geometric honeycomb type designs.
Did you say honeycomb on St. John's campus?
Wait, maybe that's how it came into our hands.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Providence.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting to point out the seashells on here because it could suggest that this comes from some sort of coastal environment. Marash is not directly on the coast. It's not so far. It's they would know what a seashell is. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing. It's also possible that seashells were just a kind of pleasant design that the binder liked to, that he had a stamp of a seashell, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to stamp the seashells on you.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
It's a little hard to say exactly what that could tell us about it, but I think it's really suggestive and really an interesting thing to notice. Yeah.
Is it like, does it relate to the text at all, or is it possible maybe this is sort of just a mass-produced design for the time, or does that not really factor in?
I think it would be much closer to the second one. I don't really see anything in the text that would relate to that directly. I think it's more likely that it was just a binder who had a few kind of stamps, and he was like, "This is what I put on my books."
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, and it doesn't. It's too small. The binding's too small for the actual pages. So is that the original binding, do you think, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say for sure whether it's the original or not. I do think that it is yet another kind of indication of the inexpensive nature of this. That this is, this is kind of students who are getting what they can get, and they don't have a lot of money for it, and they're just like making do with like the basic level of creating a manuscript. So I think that's pretty interesting to see. This is not something that's meant for display in a palace. It's meant for use. This is something that was meant to be just useful for people who were learning and who were trying to make their way in the world. So it's hard to say whether it's original or not, but it does seem to be kind of what you could get with not a lot of money for it. So I think that's interesting.
When we were looking through this is probably just this Western idea that we have, but I saw Arabic text and I was like, oh, this must be a Quran. Mm-hmm. And as we've elucidated, that's quite a misconception in this case. What other sorts of misconceptions might people have, about the culture where this was made in, or the sort of just the people who would have made this kind of book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's. I think this is a really interesting item because, of course, Arabic's the language of the Quran, but it was also the language, as I said earlier, of many different communities throughout a huge region for many centuries, and still is, of course. But these texts are just like short takes on all sorts of questions that are like relevant to people's everyday lives. How should I brush my teeth? How should I wash my beard when I'm washing up for prayer? Should non-Muslim women interact with Muslim women in like intimate kind of private settings? What happens if I'm being taken advantage of in the marketplace? That prices aren't fair. It's like all sorts of little interesting topics that are just fascinating to me. One of them, I think it might actually be the one on here. It is the one on here. Is a text about what an elephant is, and like how an elephant fits into like our understanding of like what animals can I eat, what animals can I ride, what animals can I buy and sell, what animals can I use to carry my things or to fight in a war. Elephants are weird, so but we're aware of them, so how do we fit them in? Are they like pigs and they're just unclean and we don't like them around? Are they like horses? Are they like, so it's like, it's all sorts of little things like this that are, and some of them most people were not interacting directly with elephants on a daily basis, but but lots of these things are just like questions that people had, and so I think there's a lot of really interesting material in here that's just like people thinking about everyday issues, that these are not, for the most part, they're not like explorations of giant theological concepts, but just like really down-to-earth stuff, and I think that's very cool. And I think the more that we kind of get inside people's daily lives and like see what they were thinking about, the issues they were facing, that stuff really helps you to see just people as people, and just like to understand, even if they were living in a different context, that they were facing a lot of the same problems, a lot of the same issues. Just questions about how to interact with with a diverse community around you, how to, just...
It's those little pieces that can really get rid of the othering sense
Yeah.
of this book. This is very foreign to us. Claire and I can't read it, but hearing you talk about it, I can really feel the people in there. Like, how do I brush my teeth? How often should I do that?
Yeah, no,
we still wonder that. You'll be going to bed late and you're like, I really don't want to do it. Do I gotta? And I guess we've been wondering about that back then too.
Yeah, and you can tell, you can tell these are questions that people were dealing with in this person's community. And again, he was not like one of the powerful like court officials in Constantinople. He was just a guy in this like smaller provincial town who knew the tradition, and so he was recognized as someone that people could go to and ask about. How do I brush my teeth?
Of course.
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting to get that kind of like down to earth perspective, and then you've got these people, just a couple decades later, who are in a different town, but also dealing with many of the same issues, and so they're copying a lot of these things. I think it's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, we've been talking, and really both of us do appreciate this manuscript and sort of the story of how it came here, even if we don't know that. But we're wondering, why should we care about this manuscript, about cultural preservation, about the past?
Well, I think that something like this is so interesting and so valuable for many of the reasons that we've already been talking about, that there's a lot of stuff in here that maybe doesn't exist in many places in the world. But I think that there's a very like personal aspect to this, that it's just a simple book. It includes the things that people were studying and the things that they were interested in, and the things that answered the questions that they had, and the questions that all of us are, the type of things that we're always dealing with just in our lives. And so I think that's such an important aspect of keeping things like this around, is learning to understand these people in different places and times and different contexts, and just to help to see them as humans, like I was saying. Yeah.
You said the phrase "down to earth" earlier for this book, and I just think we're talking about parchment paper, right?
Paper.
And these leather bindings, and just this kind of very homely nature of it.
Yeah.
And I love it's something about this book that feels personal and feels very human in a way that you just don't see that often. And in a lot of ways, you don't have to be able to read Arabic, or even maybe not even to open the pages at all to get that sort of feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I love a good artwork. I love gold leaf and decoration and all that stuff. I love huge monumental books and things like that. But I really like when something is just kind of what someone had access to, on limited means, and in a just kind of a normal context, just like life in a town, trying to make it in a difficult world and succeed in society. And I think there's a real kind of personal aspect to it, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mugler, for coming in. I loved learning more about this book, and of course we could make observations and assumptions about it all day. You really illuminated a lot of what it was to live at that time and to experience literature in such a personal way that I think feels like we've lost nowadays, compared to how very human and how very real that book right there feels.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast. Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Cool.
So how was your time with Dr. Mugler, our resident expert on Arabic manuscripts?
It was really nice to see just how much my perception of it has changed, knowing what's actually in the book. And I could really connect to a lot of the things that they were saying, even though this is from the 18th century. In Turkey, I've never been to Turkey. I have no connection to it, but I really find myself connecting with it a lot more that way.
Mm-hmm. In what way did you find yourself connecting to it? Because you still can't read it.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
the bummer.
I wish it just rubbed off on me, right?
Yes.
That would be nice if only language worked that way.
So how does this connect to you? Does it make a difference to your daily life?
Well, I think what I was saying, if I remember right, when I was talking about it earlier, the theological questions that they asked, that generational chain of scholarship, those are the things we learned a little bit about more. And it's what we do in college, that generational chain. but it's really interesting to see it in such a revered format, and how that plays out in that sort of respect, that choosing to write down likely your professors' sort of lectures and ideas and commenting on it is such an interesting thing to see.
Yeah.
Because some of these, I think, are very rare, from what I remember with Dr. Mugler's conversation, and would have been chosen very specifically. There's one that's very angsty, very reflective. Would never have been able to pick that up before. But
Why does something angsty and reflective connect to you?
that's probably a better question for Mark.
Oh, okay. It's because I'm an angsty young man. That's why. No, but I did pick up on that, and it was like you could feel some similarities to the people from that past at that time. And I think my favorite one was thinking about what he said. Somewhere in here is a treatise on what is an elephant, and where does it factor into like halal and how do you perceive it. But I think like growing up, we always read E is for elephant, and even though I haven't been to Africa, most of the people in Minnesota have probably never seen an elephant.
Sure.
We all grow up knowing what one is and seeing it because it's just part of our education now. Whereas back then, even if you're living in Turkey, which is probably much closer to where the elephants are, you still have to wonder, like, what is this gigantic thing and how does it fit into all of the laws that we've built around animals in our culture? I thought that was so interesting how not only our access to knowledge has changed in that way, but at the same time we're still asking a lot of the same questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if people really sat and thought about it, they would ask themselves, what on earth an elephant really is.
Yeah, exactly.
There's all sorts of stuff like that, yeah.
Well, the times have changed. The information we do with the change and how we get information has changed, but really our human nature hasn't changed. We still wonder. We still feel angst.
We still wonder.
Exactly.
Yep.
Angst all the way through.
Right.
I like what you said, Claire, about that generational chain. All the way. That's interesting. Would you unpack that? What do you mean by a generational chain?
And what I think is most interesting about that is it's in religious writings typically, and because that's where culture I feel like goes back far in that way. But you write about it, and it can seem so redundant, exhausting to write about what somebody has written, about what somebody has written, about what somebody has written. But what Dr. Mugler said is that there's that sort of respect, and sort of also a way of generationally then passing down knowledge and considering what people thought before you as, again, a sign of respect, but also sort of recognizing changing times. Because the 18th century would have been when the world is really starting to, I think, shift in huge ways because of how trade was operating. You get to see and get to hear about elephants, and it disrupts your whole sort of religious ideas and thoughts about what is possible, even if it's just in the smallest and maybe most absurd way. But there's all those avenues opening, and you can go back and see how your predecessors dealt with those, and then you can be that force, that guiding force to show how human nature maybe hasn't changed, even though we learn more about how other people are living.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's your job to continue the chain.
Yeah.
You're going to be the next one that writes in the book.
That's what was so interesting to me is, we're both history majors. Not only is this, of course, a historical artifact and living history in its own way, but this is also historiography because you have so many people writing on different parts and then commentating on each other's comments. And we're, like you said, the next part of that, except we're not writing Arabic, we're making a video about it.
Yes.
I think that's what's so interesting is that, like Mugler said, our DNA is in the page, and we are now a living part of the history of this book as well.
Yeah. So.
And we've been told many times to follow the primary sources, so we got to do that a little bit today.
Yeah.
And what's more primary than someone's written hand from the 18th century?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not much. I think it's amazing to see how much, learning what's in here, of course. I enjoyed the book. It was fun as sort of a piece of art before, but now, I don't know, I really don't want to see this thing go. I care about this so much more now. Like, it means something to me that this thing stays around because I connected with it in a very, very human way. I don't know, I feel more connected to the past than I think I would have ever guessed about some town in Marash, Turkey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the importance of history. The knowledge of the past for the understanding of the future.
And the plurality of that past.
Very good.
That's how you can tell she's a history major.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking time to explore this book, and I hope we have made it a little more accessible. If nothing else, we've also helped you care that this thing is still here.
Absolutely. And I don't see myself ever stopping.
Ah,
Yeah.
very good.
There we go.
Himmel has a future.